A poor single dad dragged a stranger from a burning car minutes later. He realized her identity. Daniel Hayes rubbed his tired eyes as his old pickup rumbled down the dark highway. The heater wheezed, barely keeping the winter chill at bay. His worn work uniform still smelled of French fries and coffee from his double shift at May's Diner. His mind drifted to Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, sleeping at Mrs. Peterson's house next door. The kind elderly neighbor always watched Lily during his late shifts, refusing any payment beyond the occasional home-cooked meal. Still, the guilt of leaving his daughter night after night weighed heavily on him. The dashboard clock read 11:42 p.m. Numbers filled his head. The electric bill due next week. Lily's growing feet needing new winter boots. The truck's suspicious rattling that would probably mean another repair bill. He sighed, his breath visible in the cold cab. "Just keep going," he whispered to himself. A mantra that had carried him through the 4 years since Sarah's death. 4 years of being both mom and dad, of stretching every dollar, of trying to give Lily a normal childhood despite their struggles. The highway stretched empty before him, moonlight gleaming off patches of ice. Pine trees loomed on either side, their branches heavy with snow. Daniel kept his speed steady, well aware of the treacherous conditions. His hands, rough from years of dishwashing and odd jobs, gripped the steering wheel firmly. A flash of movement caught his attention, headlights ahead weaving erratically. Daniel sat up straighter, his exhaustion forgotten. The car, a sleek sedan that looked out of place on this rural road, swerved violently. No, Daniel muttered, watching in horror as the vehicle hit a patch of black ice. The sedan spun wildly, tires screeching against the frozen pavement. In slow motion, he watched it careen off the road, plowing through the guardrail and tumbling down the steep embankment. Daniel slammed on his brakes, the pickup's tires grinding against the icy road as he pulled onto the shoulder. His heart pounded as flames erupted from the overturned car below. Without hesitation, he grabbed the flashlight from his glove compartment and scrambled out of the truck. The bitter cold hit him like a physical blow. His work shoes slipped on the icy slope as he half ran, half slid down the embankment. The heat from the growing flames singed his face as he approached the wreck. "Hello?" he shouted. "Can anyone hear me?" Through the shattered driver's side window, he glimpsed an unconscious woman slumped against her seatbelt. The flames were spreading quickly, licking at the crumpled hood and creeping toward the passenger compartment. Smoke filled his lungs as he reached through the broken window, fingers fumbling with the seatbelt release. "Please, God," he prayed, struggling with the jammed mechanism. The heat was becoming unbearable, and he could hear the ominous crackle of fire consuming the engine. Finally, the belt clicked free. Daniel reached in, grabbing the woman under her arms. She was dead weight in his grip, but adrenaline gave him strength he didn't know he possessed. Careful of potential injuries, he pulled her through the window, dragging her away from the burning vehicle. His muscles screamed in protest as he half-carried, half-dragged her up the steep embankment. Behind them, a loud pop, followed by a whoosh, signaled the fire reaching the gas tank. Daniel didn't look back, focusing only on getting them both to safety. They collapsed in the snow near his truck, and Daniel quickly checked her vital signs. She was breathing, though unconscious, with a nasty gash on her forehead. In the dim light from his truck's headlights, there was something familiar about her face, something that made his heart skip a beat. He shrugged off his jacket, covering her to protect her from the cold, and fumbled for his phone to call 911. As he spoke to the dispatcher, describing their location and the woman's condition, memory clicked into place. His voice faltered mid-sentence. It was her. The woman from the coffee shop 3 months ago, where they'd shared an unexpected conversation that had stretched into hours. They'd connected instantly, laughing and talking like old friends. She'd written her phone number on a napkin, but a sudden rain shower had turned it to pulp in his pocket before he could save it. He'd thought about her often since then, wondering what might have been. Now here she was, unconscious and injured, pulled from a burning wreck by pure chance. Daniel held her hand, speaking softly. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay." In the distance, sirens wailed. The woman stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering but not opening. Daniel kept talking, hoping his voice would help keep her calm. "Stay with me. The ambulance is almost here." Red and blue lights painted the snow as emergency vehicles approached. Daniel waved his flashlight, guiding them to their location. EMTs swarmed around them, efficiently transferring the woman onto a stretcher. One paramedic wrapped a blanket around Daniel's shoulders, asking if he was hurt. "I'm fine," he insisted, unable to take his eyes off the woman as they loaded her into the ambulance. "Will she be okay?" "Thanks to you, she's got a good chance," the paramedic replied. "You took a huge risk going near that burning car. But you saved her life." Daniel watched them close the ambulance doors, his mind reeling. As the vehicle pulled away, another EMT approached him with a clipboard. "We'll need your statement, sir." The patient, Miss Rebecca Jennings, is a public figure. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Rebecca Jennings. The name hit him like a physical blow. He'd seen it on campaign posters around town, heard it on local news broadcasts. She was running for city council, a rising star in local politics known for her advocacy work. Now he remembered why she'd seemed so familiar that day in the coffee shop. He'd seen her photo in the newspaper but hadn't made the connection in person. She just seemed real. Genuine. Now he understood why she'd never tried to find him after losing her number. Someone like her wouldn't waste time tracking down a struggling diner worker. As he gave his statement to the EMT, Daniel felt the weight of the situation settling onto his shoulders. He wasn't just the guy who'd pulled someone from a wreck anymore. He'd saved Rebecca Jennings, and something told him his quiet life was about to become considerably less quiet. Looking at the burning wreckage below, Daniel thought of Lily waiting at home, of bills to pay, of his simple life that suddenly felt on the verge of profound change. The night wind cut through his thin work shirt, but he barely noticed the cold. His mind was too full of memories of that coffee shop conversation, of easy laughter and genuine connection, and of the twists of fate that had brought them together again in the most unexpected way. The sedan hit the ditch with a sickening crunch of metal, flipping onto its side. Daniel slammed his brakes, his truck skidding to a halt on the icy shoulder. Before he could process what was happening, orange flames erupted from the car's engine. "Dear God," he breathed, fumbling for his phone while scrambling out of his truck. The bitter cold hit him like a slap, but he barely noticed as he punched 911 with shaking fingers. 911. "What's your emergency?" "Car crash, Route 23, about 2 miles past the Miller Creek Bridge," Daniel panted, already running toward the wreck. "Vehicle's on fire. Driver trapped inside." Heat blasted his face as he approached the burning car. Flames licked up the hood, casting wild shadows across the snow. Black smoke billowed into the night sky. Through the cracked windshield, he could make out a figure slumped over the steering wheel. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. The dispatcher's voice crackled from his phone, telling him help was on the way, warning him not to approach the burning vehicle. But there wasn't time to wait. "Please hurry," he said, dropping the phone into the snow. The driver's side door was crushed against the ground. He scrambled to the passenger side, his work boots slipping on the ice. The metal handle burned his palm, but he yanked anyway. The door groaned open. Smoke poured out, choking him. Daniel pulled his uniform shirt over his nose and ducked inside. A woman lay unconscious, held in place by her seatbelt. Her dark hair fell across her face, and blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. The fire's roar grew louder, and Daniel could feel the heat intensifying. "Hold on," he muttered, fingers fumbling with the seatbelt clasp. "I've got you." The buckle finally released. Daniel wrapped his arms around her waist, trying to be gentle despite his rising panic. The smoke burned his eyes and throat as he carefully pulled her from the seat. A loud pop from the engine made him flinch. The flames were spreading faster now, consuming the entire front of the car. Daniel's muscles strained as he lifted the woman's limp form, cradling her against his chest. Stumbling backward, he half-carried, half-dragged her away from the wreck. His lungs screamed for clean air. Just as they cleared the ditch, a deafening explosion rocked the night. The force knocked Daniel off his feet. He curled his body around the woman as they fell, protecting her from the impact. They landed in the snow, the cold seeping through his thin uniform as waves of heat washed over them from the now fully engulfed car. Daniel rolled onto his side, coughing violently. His throat felt raw, and his eyes stung, but he forced himself to focus on the woman beside him. She wasn't breathing. "No, please," he wheezed, pressing trembling fingers to her neck. There, a pulse, weak but steady. He tilted her head back. ready to start rescue breathing, when she suddenly gasped and started coughing. In the distance, sirens wailed. Red and blue lights painted the trees as emergency vehicles rounded the bend. Daniel sagged with relief, still coughing as paramedics rushed toward them with a stretcher. "Sir, are you hurt?" An EMT knelt beside him while others carefully lifted the woman onto the stretcher. Daniel shook his head, though his chest ached with every breath. "Help her," he managed between coughs. They worked quickly, wrapping her in blankets and fitting an oxygen mask over her face. Daniel watched from where he sat in the snow, another EMT draping a blanket around his shoulders and pressing an oxygen mask to his face. "You need to get checked out too," the EMT insisted, but Daniel's attention was fixed on the woman as they wheeled her toward the waiting ambulance. The flashing lights illuminated her face, and Daniel's world tilted sideways. Recognition hit him like another explosion, stealing what little breath he had left. It couldn't be. But there was no mistaking those delicate features, the same ones that had haunted his dreams for months. The woman from the coffee shop, the one perfect date that had ended with a phone number written on a napkin that had dissolved in his pocket during an unexpected downpour before he could save her number. "Rebecca," he whispered behind his oxygen mask, watching as the ambulance doors closed, taking her away for the second time. The EMT touched his shoulder. "Sir, we really should get you to the hospital to check for smoke inhalation." Daniel nodded numbly, his mind reeling from more than just the smoke and adrenaline. As they helped him to his feet, his gaze remained fixed on the ambulance pulling away, its sirens cutting through the winter night. Behind them, firefighters worked to extinguish the burning wreck, but Daniel barely noticed. After all this time, after all the what-ifs and if-onlys, fate had thrown them together again in the most unimaginable way. Only this time, he knew her name. Rebecca. Daniel's lungs burned with each breath as he sat on the cold curb, the scratchy emergency blanket pulled tight around his shoulders. Red and blue lights still pulsed against the snow, casting strange shadows across the scene. Firefighters worked in the background, their hoses sending clouds of steam into the night air as they doused the last of the flames. "Take another deep breath for me," the EMT instructed, pressing the stethoscope against Daniel's back. The metal felt ice-cold through his smoke-stained uniform shirt. "Rebecca," Daniel whispered, his voice hoarse. The name felt both foreign and familiar on his tongue. The EMT adjusted the blanket. "Miss Jennings?" "Yeah, that's her name. Rebecca Jennings. They're taking her to County General." He paused, listening to Daniel's breathing. "You know her?" Daniel closed his eyes, and suddenly he wasn't sitting on this frozen curb anymore. He was back in Mario's Italian restaurant 6 months ago, watching Rebecca laugh at his terrible attempt at pronouncing bruschetta. The small family-owned place had been packed that night, but somehow it felt like they were the only two people there. "I used to," Daniel managed between coughs. Once. The memory washed over him like a warm wave. She'd worn a blue dress that brought out her eyes, and her dark hair had fallen in soft waves around her face. They'd talked for hours, starting with their shared love of classic novels and somehow ending up debating whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She'd been so passionate in her defense of the controversial topping that her gesturing had nearly knocked over her wine glass. "Your lungs sound irritated from the smoke," the EMT's voice cut through his reverie. "We should really take you in to get checked out." But Daniel was lost again in that evening, remembering how they'd walked through the historic downtown after dinner. The autumn air had been crisp, leaves crunching under their feet as they window shopped and talked about everything and nothing. She'd mentioned working in local government but hadn't elaborated, and he hadn't pressed. He'd been too captivated by the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled. Then the rain had started, a sudden autumn shower that sent them running for cover under the awning of an old bookstore. Water had dripped from her hair, and without thinking, he'd reached out to brush a droplet from her cheek. The kiss that followed had been soft and sweet, tasting of tiramisu and promise. "Sir?" The EMT touched his shoulder. "We need to make a decision about transport." Daniel nodded absently, his mind still on that rain-soaked moment. She'd pulled away first, laughing breathlessly as she dug through her purse for something to write on. The only paper they could find was a napkin she'd stuffed in her pocket from the restaurant. She'd scribbled her number down, pressing hard with the pen to make sure it would stick to the damp paper. "I'll call you tomorrow," she'd said, tucking the napkin into his jacket pocket. But tomorrow never came. The rain had grown heavier on his walk home, soaking through his clothes. By the time he'd reached for the napkin, it had dissolved into an illegible mess of blue ink and wet paper. He'd gone back to Mario's every Friday for a month, hoping she might return. He'd even tried searching social media, but without knowing her last name or where she worked, he'd come up empty. Eventually, he'd forced himself to accept that some things weren't meant to be, no matter how perfect they seemed. "Your daughter," the EMT said, packing up his equipment. "Is there someone who can stay with her while we get you checked out?" The mention of Lily snapped Daniel back to the present. "Mrs. Peterson's watching her," he said, his voice still rough. "She can stay overnight if needed." The elderly neighbor had been a godsend since his wife passed, often watching Lily during his late shifts at the diner. The ambulance's sirens faded into the distance, carrying Rebecca Jennings, toward County General. The same woman who'd made him laugh harder than he had in years, who'd talked about her dreams of making the world better, who'd kissed him in the rain like something out of a movie. She'd been right there in his arms again tonight. But under such different circumstances, Daniel watched the ambulance's taillights disappear around the bend, leaving him alone in the icy night. The firefighters were packing up their equipment, and a tow truck was arriving to deal with the charred remains of Rebecca's car. The scene felt surreal, like a dream he might wake from at any moment. Was this fate's idea of a joke? Or was it something else? A second chance he'd never dared hope for. The thought sent an unexpected tremor through him that had nothing to do with the cold. "Last chance," the EMT said, holding open the back doors of the second ambulance. "You really should let us take you in. Have a nodder take you in." Daniel stared down the empty road where Rebecca's ambulance had vanished, his heart torn between hope and fear. The night's events played through his mind in a dizzying loop. The crash, the flames, the rescue, and then that moment of recognition. After all this time, after searching for so long, he'd found her again in the most unimaginable way possible. The ambulance's running lights cast long shadows across the snow-covered ground as Daniel sat there, lost in thought. His chest ached, both from the smoke and from the weight of what had just happened. He couldn't shake the image of her unconscious face, so different from the animated expressions he remembered from their date. The contrast was jarring, almost cruel in its intensity. The distant wail of Rebecca's ambulance had long since faded into the night, leaving behind only the soft hiss of steam rising from the wreckage and the quiet murmur of the emergency crews. Daniel remained motionless on the curb, clutching the blanket around his shoulders, his eyes fixed on the point where the ambulance had disappeared. The mix of awe and fear in his chest made it hard to breathe, or maybe that was still the smoke. Either way, he sat there in the cold, wondering if the universe was offering him a miracle or setting him up for another heartbreak. Daniel's eyes fluttered open to the pale morning light streaming through his bedroom window. Every muscle in his body ached, and the smell of smoke still clung to his hair and clothes. He groaned as he sat up, memories of the previous night's rescue flooding back like a vivid dream. "Daddy!" Lily burst into the room, her brown pigtails bouncing. She stopped short, wrinkling her nose. "Why do you smell like a campfire?" Before Daniel could answer, Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor who had watched Lily overnight, appeared in the doorway. The TV buzzed in the living room behind her. "Breaking news this morning." The reporter's voice carried through the small house. "A dramatic late-night rescue on Highway 23 has left the community searching for answers. City Council candidate Rebecca Jennings was pulled from her burning vehicle by an unknown Good Samaritan who fled the scene before police arrived." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened. "Daniel Hayes, that was you, wasn't it?" Daniel ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I just did what anyone would do." "What did you do, Daddy?" Lily climbed onto the bed next to him, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Your father's a hero, sweetheart," Mrs. Thompson said, turning up the volume on the TV. "He saved someone's life last night." Lily's mouth formed a perfect O as she stared at her father. Daniel shifted uncomfortably under her admiring gaze. "You should come forward, Daniel," Mrs. Thompson urged. "They're looking for you. This could be good for you and Lily." Daniel shook his head. "I'm not looking for attention, Mrs. Thompson. Besides, someone like Rebecca Jennings, she probably doesn't want to be associated with." He gestured around their modest apartment, with its worn furniture and patched walls. "Nonsense," Mrs. Thompson said firmly. "You're a hero, Plain and simple. The morning passed in a blur as Daniel got Lily ready for school. He tried to ignore the news reports, each one speculating about the mystery rescuer. His hands trembled slightly as he tied Lily's shoes. "Are you scared, Daddy?" Lily asked, touching his shaking fingers. "No, sweetie," he lied. "Just tired." Later that afternoon, during his shift at Joe's diner, everything changed. Daniel was refilling coffee cups when the bell above the door chimed. A group of reporters rushed in, cameras flashing. "Sir, are you Daniel Hayes?" one called out. "Witnesses say you were at the scene of Rebecca Jennings' accident last night." Daniel nearly dropped the coffee pot. The other customers turned to stare, and his manager, Joe, emerged from the kitchen. Daniel's throat felt dry. He looked at Joe, who nodded encouragingly. "It's true," Daniel finally said, his voice quiet but steady. "I saw the accident and helped get Miss Jennings out of the car." The reporters pressed closer, shouting questions. "Why did you leave the scene? Did you know it was Rebecca Jennings? What made you risk your life?" "Please," Daniel held up his hands. "I'm just trying to work. I didn't do anything special. I couldn't let someone die if I could help." Joe stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Daniel's shoulder. "My boy here's too modest. Been working for me for 5 years, raising his daughter alone, and now he saves a life without thinking twice. That's a real hero." The story spread like wildfire through their small town. Customers kept coming into the diner just to shake Daniel's hand. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from Rebecca's campaign team, requesting a meeting once she recovered enough for visitors. "Mr. Hayes," one message read, "Miss Jennings would like to thank you personally for your heroic actions. Please contact us at your earliest convenience." Daniel stared at the message during his break, his stomach churning. The memory of their perfect first date months ago made his heart ache. How could he face her now, in these circumstances? That evening, Daniel tucked Lily into bed, her favorite stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. She reached up and touched his cheek. "Mrs. Thompson says you're a hero, Daddy," she said sleepily. "Like Superman." Daniel smiled, smoothing back her hair. "I'm just your regular old dad, sweetheart." "Nuh-uh," Lily shook her head. "You're super dad." She yawned widely. "Will you tell me about how you saved the lady?" "Maybe tomorrow," Daniel said softly, kissing her forehead. "Time for sleep now." After Lily drifted off, Daniel stood at her window, looking out at the quiet street below. A news van was still parked at the corner, waiting for a story. His phone buzzed again with another message from Rebecca's team. The weight of expectations and attention pressed down on his shoulders, making it hard to breathe. He touched the cool glass of the window, watching his breath fog the pain. Just yesterday, he'd been invisible. Just another struggling single dad trying to make ends meet. Now, everything was about to change, and he wasn't sure if he was ready for what lay ahead. Daniel shifted his weight from foot to foot as he stood before the hospital entrance. The small bouquet of wildflowers trembled in his weathered hands, purple and yellow blooms that Lily had insisted on picking from their tiny backyard that morning. "They're prettier than store flowers, Daddy," she declared with 8-year-old wisdom. "They have personality." A cluster of reporters huddled near the main doors, their cameras and microphones at the ready. Daniel took a deep breath and walked around to the side entrance he'd spotted earlier. The less attention, the better. Inside, the hospital's antiseptic smell made his nose twitch. At the nurse's station, he cleared his throat softly. "I'm here to see Rebecca Jennings?" The nurse's eyes widened with recognition. "Oh, you're him, the hero from the accident." She quickly checked her computer. "Room 317. She's been asking about you." Daniel's heart skipped a beat as he made his way to the 3rd floor. The elevator felt too cramped, his reflection in the metal doors showing a man who looked more scared than heroic. His work shirt was wrinkled despite his best attempts to iron it, and dark circles lined his eyes from another restless night. Room 317's door stood slightly ajar. Daniel knocked gently. "Come in," called a familiar voice that made his chest tighten. Rebecca lay propped up against white pillows, an IV line trailing from her arm. Despite the hospital gown and the bandage on her forehead, she looked beautiful. Her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Daniel," she breathed. "You came." He stepped forward, suddenly conscious of how simple the wildflowers looked. These are from my daughter, Lily. Well, from our yard, actually. He set them on her bedside table, feeling foolish. They're perfect. Rebecca reached out and touched one delicate purple bloom. Natural and real. Just like that night we spent together. Daniel sat in the chair beside her bed, his hands clasped in his lap. I never thought I'd see you again. After the rain washed away your number. He trailed off, remembering his disappointment. Rebecca laughed softly, then winced at the movement. I looked for you at that restaurant for weeks after, but I only knew your first name. And the waiter couldn't help. I did the same thing, Daniel admitted. I felt like I'd lost something special before it could even begin. And now here we are. Rebecca's eyes grew serious. Because you pulled me from a burning car. Daniel, I don't even know how to thank you. He shook his head. Anyone would have done the same. No, she said firmly. They wouldn't have. The police told me how close it was, how the car exploded right after. You could have died. Daniel thought of Lily, how she'd have been left alone if things had gone differently. But he knew, even now, he'd make the same choice again. I couldn't just drive past. Rebecca reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm, alive, and it sent the same spark through him that he'd felt months ago. That's exactly who you are, the man who stops, the man who helps. She squeezed his fingers. The man I wished I'd found again. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both aware of the connection humming between them. Then the door burst open, making them both jump. A sharp-suited man strode in, followed by two women with tablets. Rebecca, we need to talk about the press strategy. Oh. He stopped short, looking at Daniel with barely concealed dismay. Mr. Hayes, I'm Martin Webb, Rebecca's campaign manager. Daniel started to stand, but Rebecca's grip on his hand tightened. Martin, I'm glad you're here. We need to discuss how we're handling this story. Martin's face tightened. Rebecca, maybe we should talk privately about… No, Rebecca cut him off. Daniel stays. He's part of this now. One of the women with tablets stepped forward. Miss Jennings, we need to consider the optics carefully. While Mr. Hayes's actions were heroic, his background. She glanced uncomfortably at Daniel. A single father working as a diner cook, living in subsidized housing. Opponents could spin this negatively. Daniel felt heat rise in his cheeks. He gently tried to withdraw his hand, but Rebecca wouldn't let go. That's exactly why this matters, Rebecca said, her voice gaining strength. Daniel represents everything my campaign stands for, hard-working people who care about their community, who step up when others need help, regardless of the cost to themselves. Martin paced the small room. The media will dig. They'll look for anything they can use against both of you. Are you prepared for that kind of scrutiny, Mr. Hayes? Daniel thought of his modest apartment, his struggle to make ends meet, the years of barely getting by. I don't want to harm Rebecca's campaign, he said quietly. You're not harming anything, Rebecca insisted. She turned to her team. Daniel is part of my story now, whether you like it or not. He saved my life. More than that, he represents the very people we're fighting for. I won't hide him away like he's something shameful. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Martin opened his mouth to argue further, but Rebecca held up her hand. That's final. Now, I need to rest. Daniel, will you come back tomorrow? He nodded, finally standing. If you're sure, I'm sure. Her smile was warm, genuine, and it gave him strength. Daniel slipped out of the room as Martin and his team huddled around Rebecca's bed, their voices low and urgent. In the elevator, he leaned against the wall, his mind spinning. He wanted to be near Rebecca, to explore this connection that fate had mysteriously renewed. But he also wanted to protect her, and if his presence could hurt her chances. Lost in thought, he pushed through the hospital's main doors and walked straight into a wall of reporters. Mr. Hayes, how do you know Miss Jennings? Was the accident really an accident? What's your relationship with the candidate? How does it feel to be a hero? Camera flashes exploded around him as microphones thrust toward his face. Daniel raised his hands, trying to shield his eyes, his heart hammering as the reporters pressed closer, their questions growing louder and more insistent. The autumn sun painted the town square in warm golden light as Daniel parked his old pickup truck. His hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Lily bounced in her seat beside him, already wearing her favorite blue dress with white polka dots. "Daddy, look! There's so many people!" Lily pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with excitement. Daniel took a deep breath. The square was indeed packed, with families sprawled on checkered blankets and children running through the grass. The scent of grilled hot dogs and cotton candy drifted through the air. A small stage had been set up near the central fountain, where Rebecca stood chatting with a group of supporters. "Ready, sweetie?" Daniel helped Lily out of the truck, smoothing down her dress. "Ready." She grabbed his hand, pulling him forward with the fearless enthusiasm only an 8-year-old could muster. Rebecca spotted them immediately. Her face lit up as she excused herself from her conversation and walked over. She wore a simple sundress that made her look more like the woman from their first date than a politician. "Daniel. Lily." Rebecca's smile was genuine as she bent down to Lily's level. "I love your dress. Blue is my favorite color, too." Lily beamed. "Daddy says you're the lady he saved from the fire. That makes you like a princess, and he's like a knight." Rebecca laughed, the sound carrying across the square. "Your daddy is definitely a hero. Would you like to help me tell everyone about how brave he is?" Daniel felt his cheeks flush. "Rebecca, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." She touched his arm gently. "These people need to know there are still good men in the world who'll risk everything to help a stranger." The afternoon unfolded like a dream. Rebecca introduced Daniel to the crowd, her voice strong and clear as she recounted the accident. Daniel stood awkwardly beside her, hands in his pockets, but the warmth in people's eyes made his discomfort fade. An elderly woman approached him afterward, tears in her eyes. "Young man, you remind me of my late husband. He was a good man, too." She hugged him tight, pressing a check into his hand. "For your little girl's education." More people came forward, a local business owner offering a college fund contribution, a teacher volunteering free tutoring for Lily, families sharing their own stories of struggle and hope. Daniel tried to refuse their generosity, but Rebecca squeezed his hand. "Let them help," she whispered. "Sometimes accepting kindness is as brave as offering it." While Lily played tag with other children near the fountain, Daniel and Rebecca found a quiet spot under an oak tree. They sat on a wooden bench, watching the community celebration unfold. "I looked for you, you know," Rebecca said softly. "After our date, I went back to that little Italian restaurant 3 times, hoping you'd show up." Daniel's heart ached. "The rain washed away your number. I felt so stupid for not copying it down right away. I even drove around your neighborhood, but I couldn't remember which street. Maybe the timing wasn't right then." Rebecca's shoulder brushed against his. "Sometimes life makes us wait for the important things." They talked about everything and nothing. His wife's passing, her dreams of making real change in the city, their shared love of mystery novels. It felt as natural as breathing. This connection between them. Lily interrupted their conversation, running up with a piece of paper clutched in her hands. "Look what I drew!" The crayon drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one with spiky brown hair, a smaller one with yellow pigtails, and a medium-sized one with long red hair. Hearts floated around them like balloons. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. "Can I keep it?" Lily nodded proudly. "It's us. See? There's Daddy, and me, and you." Daniel watched as Rebecca carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into her purse. The simple acceptance in both their faces made his chest tight with feeling. As the sun began to set, families packed up their blankets and headed home. Daniel helped the volunteers clean up while Lily followed Rebecca around, chattering about her favorite books and asking if Rebecca knew any princess stories. "She's wonderful," Rebecca told him as they walked back to his truck. "You've done an amazing job raising her." "Some days I wonder if I'm doing enough," Daniel admitted. "Look at her, Daniel. Really look." Rebecca gestured to where Lily was twirling in the last rays of sunlight, her dress spinning out around her. "She's happy, kind, and full of love. That's everything." The drive home was quiet. with Lily falling asleep almost immediately. Her small head rested against the window, her face peaceful in the glow of passing streetlights. Daniel glanced at her and felt his heart expand, with a joy he'd almost forgotten was possible. The weight of constant worry seemed lighter somehow. The memory of Rebecca's smile, the community's embrace, and his daughter's innocent drawing had awakened something he'd thought was lost forever. Hope. As he drove through the familiar streets toward home, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a future filled with more than just survival. For the first time in years, he dared to dream of love. The community center buzzed with excitement. Hundreds of people packed the auditorium, their eager faces illuminated by stage lights. Campaign posters adorned the walls, and Rebecca Jennings for city council banners hung from the rafters. Daniel Hayes stood backstage, his hands trembling as he smoothed his borrowed tie. "You'll do great, Dad." Lily's voice carried from the front row, where she sat in a pretty blue dress, her legs swinging beneath her chair. She waved enthusiastically, and Daniel managed a weak smile in return. Rebecca appeared beside him, radiant in a navy blazer. "Are you ready?" she asked softly, squeezing his arm. "Not even close," Daniel admitted, his throat dry. "I've never spoken to more than 3 people at once, unless you count taking dinner orders." "Just be yourself," Rebecca said. That's who they need to hear from, the real Daniel Hayes. The crowd's applause thundered as Rebecca took the stage. Her voice filled the room with warmth and conviction as she introduced Daniel. "Tonight, I want you to meet someone special. A man who didn't hesitate when faced with danger. A father who teaches us that true courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified." Daniel's legs felt like lead as he walked to the podium. The bright lights made it hard to see the audience, but he could make out Lily's beaming face. He took a deep breath and began. "I'm not good at speeches," he started, his voice shaky. "I'm better at fixing cars and making pancakes for my daughter." A gentle laugh rippled through the crowd, helping him relax. "Most nights, I work late at Joe's Diner. The pay isn't great, but the coffee's decent, and the regulars treat me like family." As he spoke, his voice grew stronger. He talked about losing his wife, about raising Lily alone, about the nights he'd gone hungry so his daughter could eat. "Being poor isn't just about empty pockets," he said. "It's about the weight you carry, the fear that one missed paycheck could mean losing everything." Tears glistened in people's eyes as Daniel described the night of the accident. "I didn't think about politics or headlines. I just saw someone who needed help. That's what community means, reaching out when others are in trouble, no matter who they are." By the time he finished, the audience was on their feet. Their applause washed over him like a wave. Rebecca hugged him tight, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Backstage, away from the cameras and crowd, Rebecca found him in a quiet corner. "That was beautiful," she whispered. Their eyes met, and the space between them seemed to disappear. When their lips touched, it felt like coming home. But perfection never lasts. The next morning's headline hit like a sledgehammer. "Hero or Menace? Savior's Dark Past Exposed." The article was brutal, dredging up a desperate mistake from 20 years ago. At 19, grieving and broke after his wife's death, Daniel had stolen formula and diapers for baby Lily. He'd been caught, charged, and given probation. The story spread like wildfire. News vans camped outside his house. Social media exploded with cruel comments. Rebecca's opponent called her judgment into question. How could she trust someone with a criminal record? Daniel sat at his kitchen table that night, staring at the newspaper. The words blurred through his tears as he read them again. Questions arise about Rebecca Jennings' relationship with convicted thief. His hands shook as he tore the paper to shreds, watching the pieces scatter across the table. The sound of small footsteps made him look up. Lily stood in the doorway in her pajamas, her stuffed giraffe clutched tight against her chest. Her lower lip trembled. "Daddy?" she whispered. "Tommy's mom at school said you did something bad. She said you're a bad person." She crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around his waist. "But you're not bad. You're my daddy." Daniel pulled her close, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain to an 8-year-old that the world sometimes twists the truth? That good people can make mistakes? That love and redemption are harder to find than judgment? He just held her tighter as tears slid down his cheeks. the torn newspaper scattered around them like fallen leaves. "Why are people saying mean things about you, Daddy?" Lily's voice was muffled against his shirt. Daniel stroked her hair, his heart breaking at the confusion in her voice. But he couldn't find an answer. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking each moment of his shame. Outside, a news van's headlights swept across the window, a harsh reminder that there would be no easy escape from this nightmare. Daniel kept holding his daughter, surrounded by the shredded remnants of the article that had destroyed everything he'd dared to hope for. The quiet kitchen felt like a sanctuary and a prison all at once, protecting them from the world outside, but unable to shield them from the pain that had already found its way in. The morning sun cast long shadows through Daniel's kitchen window, but he barely noticed its warmth. His phone buzzed again, the 10th call he'd ignored since dawn. With trembling hands, he switched it off completely, unable to face another reporter or concerned friend. Lily sat at the kitchen table, pushing her cereal around without eating. Her usually bright eyes were clouded with worry. "Daddy, why aren't we going outside today?" Daniel's heart clenched. Through the window, he could see 2 news vans parked across the street. Neighbors walked by slowly, pointing and whispering. Some faces he'd known for years now looked at his house with judgment or, worse, pity. "We're just having a quiet day at home, sweetheart," he managed, trying to keep his voice steady. But even to his own ears, the words sounded hollow. The newspaper lay crumpled on the counter where he'd thrown it earlier. The headline screamed at him, "Hero or Menace. Council candidate's savior has criminal past." Below it, they'd somehow dug up his old mugshot, a scared, skinny kid with hollow eyes, taken 8 years ago. The memories hit him like a physical blow. And suddenly he was back there, standing in the grocery store, his jacket bulging with stolen food, baby formula hidden beneath. Lily had been so tiny then, just 6 months old. Their cupboards were empty, and grief for his late wife had left him barely functioning. The store manager's hand on his shoulder, the shame of handcuffs, the judge's stern but compassionate face as Daniel sobbed through his explanation. He'd done his community service, gotten counseling. Found honest work, no matter how exhausting. But now, watching another news van pull up outside, he realized none of that mattered. One desperate mistake would forever define him in the public eye. His phone lay silent now, but Rebecca's last messages still burned in his mind. "Please call me, we can fix this. Don't disappear again." Her voice in the voicemails had been strong, determined, the voice that had won over voters and his heart. But he couldn't drag her down with him. Lily's small hand touched his arm. "Daddy, you're crying." Daniel wiped his eyes quickly, but his daughter's perception cut through his defenses. "Sometimes grown-ups cry too, baby. It's okay. Is it because of what they're saying about you? About the bad thing you did?" The innocent question nearly broke him. He knelt beside her chair, taking her tiny hands in his. "A long time ago, after Mommy went to heaven, I made a mistake. I was scared and sad, and I did something wrong. But I learned from it. And I've tried every day since then to be a good person, to be the daddy you deserve." Lily nodded solemnly. "You are good, Daddy. You saved Miss Rebecca. You're my hero." Her words, meant to comfort, only twisted the knife deeper. He hugged her tight, breathing in the sweet smell of her hair, trying to draw strength from her pure faith in him. But he knew what he had to do. He called their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, who had always been kind to them. She agreed to watch Lily for a few hours, understanding in her voice when he explained he needed to handle something important. The drive to Rebecca's campaign office felt like walking to his own execution. Security let him in through a back entrance, away from the press. He found her in her private office, looking tired but beautiful, surrounded by advisors arguing strategy. When she saw him, her face lit up with relief. "Daniel! Thank God. We've been trying to reach you. I have a plan. Rebecca, please." His voice cracked. "I need to talk to you alone." She dismissed her team, despite their protests. As soon as the door closed, she crossed to him, reaching for his hands. "Whatever you're thinking, stop. We can handle this together. No. He stepped back, though it physically hurt to do so. Your whole campaign is about making this city better, about fighting for people who need help. I won't be the reason you lose that chance. You're part of why I want to win. Her eyes flashed with passion. Your story, it's exactly what I've been fighting for. Second chances. Redemption. The dignity of every person. I'm a liability. He cut in, the words bitter on his tongue. Everything they're saying about me is true. I did steal. I did get arrested. And now they'll use that to destroy everything you've worked for. I don't care what they say. Rebecca moved closer, her hand touching his cheek. I care about who you are now. The man who risks his life for strangers. The father who works 3 jobs to give his daughter a better life. The man I don't. Daniel stepped back again, his heart breaking. Please don't say it. You deserve better than someone who'll always have this shadow hanging over them. Your voters deserve better. Daniel, please. He turned away, unable to bear the tears in her eyes. I'm walking away, Rebecca. For your sake. For everyone's sake. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm sorry. The walk back to his truck felt endless. Each step echoed with the weight of what he was leaving behind. Not just Rebecca, but the hope of love, of a fresh start, of finally being more than his past mistakes. In his rearview mirror, his reflection stared back, a man haunted by shadows he thought he'd outrun, now dragging him back into darkness. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white and drove away from the only woman who had made him believe in second chances. Daniel stirred the pot of tomato soup, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. The kitchen was quiet, except for the soft clink of Lily's spoon against her bowl. Outside, a light snow had begun to fall, dusting their small world in white. He tried to focus on these simple things, anything to keep his mind off the mess he'd made of everything. Daddy? Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. She dunked her piece of bread into the soup, creating tiny ripples. Why did you give up on Miss Rebecca? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. He set down his own spoon, searching for words that would make sense to an 8-year-old. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices, sweetie, to protect the people they care about. Lily frowned, her small face scrunching up in that way that meant she was working through a problem. But you always tell me we shouldn't let bullies win. Those mean people in the newspaper are bullies, aren't they? Daniel's throat tightened. Trust his daughter to see things so clearly. It's complicated, Lily Pad. No, it's not. She put down her spoon with surprising firmness. You saved Miss Rebecca from the fire. You were brave and strong, like a superhero. Why are you letting bad people decide who you are? Her words struck deep, echoing in his chest. Daniel looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. She sat there in her favorite purple sweater, hair slightly messy from school, eyes bright with that pure, unshakable faith children have. In her eyes, he wasn't the man who'd made desperate choices as a teenager. He was her father. The man who worked double shifts to keep food on the table, who read her stories every night, who pulled a woman from burning wreckage without hesitation. You're right about the bullies, he said softly. I've been so afraid of what people might think about my past that I forgot who I am now. Lily nodded sagely, as if she'd known this all along. Miss Rebecca likes who you are now. She told me so at the rally. She said you have a beautiful heart. Something warm bloomed in Daniel's chest, melting the cold fear that had gripped him these past days. He remembered Rebecca's face when he'd told her he needed to step away. The hurt, the disappointment, but most of all, the unwavering belief in him that he'd been too scared to accept. Come here, sweetheart, he said, opening his arms. Lily scrambled from her chair and into his lap, bringing the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and grape juice. He held her close, drawing strength from her simple, powerful love. I've been teaching you to be brave, he murmured into her hair. But maybe I needed to learn that lesson myself. Lily pulled back, her face serious. Can we pray about it? Like we do when I'm scared of thunderstorms? Daniel smiled, touched by her suggestion. They hadn't prayed together since this whole mess started. He'd been too wrapped up in his shame. That's a wonderful idea. They bowed their heads there at the kitchen table, soup growing cold, snow falling silently outside. Daniel's voice was rough with emotion as he began. Dear Lord, I've been lost these past few days. I've let fear and shame guide my choices instead of faith and truth. Lily's small hand squeezed his as he continued. Please give me the strength to face my past with courage, to be the man you created me to be, not the man others want to see. Help me show Lily that doing what's right matters more than doing what's easy. And please help Miss Rebecca, Lily added earnestly. She looks sad when Daddy's not around. Daniel's heart clenched at those words. He finished the prayer, voice steadier now. Guide my words and actions, Lord. Help me find the right path forward. Amen. Amen. Lily echoed, then looked up at him with hope shining in her eyes. Are you going to fix things now? He brushed her hair back from her forehead, seeing in her face echoes of her mother's strength. Yes, sweetheart. No more running away. They finished their dinner, the atmosphere lighter somehow. Daniel helped Lily with her homework, then supervised her bath time, all while his mind worked through what needed to be done. By the time he was tucking her into bed, wrapped snug in her favorite butterfly blanket, he felt more certain of his path than he had in days. Tomorrow will be different, he whispered, kissing her forehead. I promise. Lily smiled sleepily. Good. I like it better when you're brave. After she drifted off, Daniel sat at the small desk in his room, pulling out paper and pen. The words came slowly at first, then faster as he poured out his heart. He wrote about that desperate night years ago, about being a terrified young father with no money for food, about the shame of being caught, but also about the kindness of the store owner who pressed charges but then helped him find his first real job. He wrote about learning from mistakes, about working honest hours to build a better life, about teaching Lily the difference between right and wrong by owning up to his past. The words flowed until his hand cramped, but he kept going, knowing these were the truths he needed to share with the world. The snow continued falling outside his window, covering the world in fresh white. Tomorrow, he would step into that clean slate with his head held high, ready to face whatever came. Not just for himself, not just for Rebecca, but for the little girl sleeping down the hall who believed in him so completely. Rebecca stood at the entrance of the community center's main hall, her heart racing beneath her composed exterior. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning, and the buzz of reporters filled the air. Her campaign manager, Thomas, shifted nervously beside her, shuffling through note cards. Are you sure about this? He whispered. The polls don't matter today, Rebecca said firmly, straightening her blue blazer. What matters is the truth. The wooden podium waited at the front of the room, surrounded by a forest of microphones. Rebecca had given countless speeches here, but today felt different. The weight of expectations pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Just as she stepped toward the podium, movement at the back of the hall caught her attention. The double doors swung open, and a hush fell over the crowd. Daniel Hayes walked in, his work-worn hand holding onto little Lily's smaller one. His face was tired but determined, his shoulders straight despite the burden he carried. Lily wore her best dress, the yellow one with daisies, and her hair was carefully braided. She looked up at her father with complete trust, squeezing his hand as whispers rippled through the crowd. Rebecca felt her throat tighten with emotion. She hadn't expected him to come, not after everything. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, all the cameras and reporters seemed to fade away. Daniel made his way through the parting crowd, Lily matching his steps. When he reached the front, he gave Rebecca a small nod. Without a word, she stepped aside, letting him take the podium. The microphones squealed with feedback as Daniel adjusted them. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice came out clear and strong. My name is Daniel Hayes, he began, and I'm here to tell you the truth about who I am. The reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Lily stood proudly beside him, her presence giving him strength. 15 years ago, I was a different man. My wife had just died, leaving me alone with our newborn daughter. He glanced down at Lily, who smiled encouragingly. We had no insurance, no savings, and I couldn't find work fast enough. One night, with nothing left in our cupboards and a crying baby at home, I made a choice I'll always regret. I stole food from a grocery store. The room was completely silent now, every eye fixed on Daniel. I was caught, of course. The store owner could have pressed charges, but instead, he saw something in me. A desperate father, not a criminal. He gave me a job washing dishes, and that job saved my life. It saved Lily's life. Daniel's voice grew stronger as he continued. Since that day, I've worked every honest job I could find. 2, sometimes 3 at a time. I've mopped floors, fixed cars, served coffee. Anything to give my daughter the life she deserves. That's who I am. Not a hero, just a father trying his best to do right. Tears glistened in his eyes, but he didn't wipe them away. When I pulled Miss Jennings from that burning car, I wasn't thinking about politics or reputations. I saw someone who needed help, just like that store owner saw in me years ago. That's what community means, seeing past mistakes to the humanity in each other. Rebecca watched from the side, her own eyes growing misty. The reporters who had been so eager to tear Daniel down now looked thoughtful, some nodding slowly. "You can judge me for my past," Daniel said, his voice gentle but firm. "But know that every day since then, I've tried to be the kind of person my daughter could be proud of. And if that's not enough for you, then maybe we need to ask ourselves what redemption really means." As Daniel stepped back from the podium, Rebecca moved forward. She reached for his hand, and he took it, their fingers intertwining naturally. Lily beamed up at them both. "This is the man who saved my life," Rebecca declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Not just that night on the road, but every day since. By showing me what real courage looks like." She turned to face the cameras directly. "If anyone thinks Daniel Hayes' past makes him unworthy of respect, then they don't understand the meaning of growth, of forgiveness, or of love." She squeezed Daniel's hand tighter. "I will not let fear or prejudice dictate who I can care about or what I stand for. Daniel is twice a hero, once for saving my life, and every day since for living with integrity and grace despite the hardships he's faced." The silence in the hall lasted for one breathless moment. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single person began to clap. The sound spread like a wave, growing louder and louder until the whole room thundered with applause. Reporters stood from their seats, camera flashes creating a storm of light. Daniel and Rebecca stood together at the podium, their hands still joined, while Lily hugged her father's leg. They were a picture of defiance and hope, not just for themselves, but for anyone who had ever needed a second chance. The applause continued to roll through the hall like thunder, drowning out the doubts and fears that had seemed so overwhelming just moments before. In that moment, they were more than just a candidate and a single father. They were a testament to the power of truth, courage, and love in the face of judgment. The evening light filtered through Rebecca's living room windows, casting a warm glow over the nervous faces gathered around the TV. Daniel sat on the well-worn couch, his weathered hands clasped tightly in his lap. Rebecca perched beside him, her campaign suit traded for comfortable jeans and a soft sweater. Between them, Lily sprawled on the floor, a bowl of popcorn nestled in her lap. "And another precinct reporting in." The TV announcer's voice filled the room. "Don't worry," Lily announced, tossing a piece of popcorn into her mouth. "I'm your good luck charm. That's what Daddy always says when we play board games." Daniel smiled, reaching down to ruffle his daughter's hair. "That you are, sweetheart." Rebecca laughed, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. Her fingers drummed against her knee, a nervous habit he'd noticed over their weeks together. Without thinking, he reached over and took her hand. She squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. "The numbers are looking close," Rebecca murmured, her eyes fixed on the scrolling results. "After everything that happened." "Hey," Daniel said softly. "Whatever happens, we faced it together. That's what matters." Lily turned around, her face serious. "Miss Rebecca, even if you don't win, can we still have movie nights? Because you do the best voices when you read stories." Rebecca's eyes welled up, and she slid down to the floor to hug Lily. "Oh, sweetie, of course. You're stuck with me now, voices and all." The moment was interrupted by a sudden surge of excitement from the TV. They all snapped their attention to the screen, where the final numbers were rolling in. The room seemed to hold its breath. "And we can now project," the announcer declared, "that Rebecca Jennings has won the city council seat by a margin of—" The rest was drowned out by Lily's excited shriek. She jumped up, scattering popcorn everywhere as she launched herself at Rebecca. "You did it! You did it!" Rebecca sat stunned for a moment before breaking into a radiant smile. She gathered Lily in her arms, laughing and crying at the same time. Daniel watched them, his heart so full it hurt. This was what healing looked like, not just for him, but for all of them. After the initial celebration died down and the phone calls from campaign staff were answered, they settled back onto the couch. Lily had crashed from her excitement, curled up in an armchair with Rebecca's cat snuggled against her. "I still can't believe it," Rebecca whispered, leaning her head on Daniel's shoulder. "When that article came out about your past, I thought that it was over," Daniel finished. "Me too. But you taught me something important, that running from the past only gives it power over you." Rebecca turned to face him, her eyes serious. "You know this changes things, right? The spotlight, the responsibilities." "I know," Daniel nodded, "but we've already weathered the worst of it together. And honestly, seeing you fight for what you believe in, watching you refuse to let fear or judgment win, it's made me braver too." Rebecca smiled, tracing her fingers along his palm. "I've been thinking about the future. About us, about Lily." "Me too," Daniel admitted. "It's funny. For so long, I was just focused on survival, getting through each day, making sure Lily had enough. But now," he glanced at his sleeping daughter, "now, I'm starting to dream again." "Tell me," Rebecca encouraged, curling closer. "I dream about Sunday mornings making pancakes together, about hearing Lily laugh more, watching her grow up with a woman who shows her how to be strong and kind at the same time." He paused, gathering courage. "I dream about building something real with you, something that brings together all the parts of our lives. Faith, family, your work for the community." Rebecca's eyes shimmered with tears. "You know what amazes me? That night of the accident, I was feeling so lost. The campaign had become all about image and politics. But then you pulled me from that car, and suddenly everything shifted back into focus. What matters isn't winning or losing. It's how we treat each other, how we lift each other up." They both watched as Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about popcorn. Rebecca's expression softened with such tenderness that Daniel's heart skipped. "She asked me the other day if she could call me Mom someday," Rebecca whispered. "I told her that would be the greatest honor of my life, even better than winning any election." Daniel swallowed hard against the emotion in his throat. "You know, after Sarah died, I never thought Lily would have this again. A mother's love, someone to look up to share those special moments that only a mom and daughter can have." "God works in mysterious ways," Rebecca said, squeezing his hand. "Sometimes the hardest roads lead us exactly where we need to be." The city lights twinkled through the windows, and the TV continued to murmur election coverage in the background. But in that moment, the only thing that mattered was this: the three of them, together, starting a new chapter. Weeks passed, and autumn painted the city in brilliant colors. The park near Rebecca's house became their favorite weekend spot, a place where campaign promises and public duties could be set aside for simple family joy. Daniel held Rebecca's hand as they walked along the leaf-strewn path, watching Lily dance ahead of them. The morning sun caught the highlights in Rebecca's hair, and Daniel marveled at how natural this all felt, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. Lily's laughter echoed as she chased swirling leaves, her pink coat a bright splash of color against the autumn backdrop. A few passers-by recognized Rebecca, offering warm congratulations, but most just saw what Daniel saw, a family finding its way together. He squeezed Rebecca's hand, the words rising from his heart with quiet certainty. "God really does bring beauty from ashes, doesn't he?" Rebecca's answering smile was radiant as the morning sun, both of them knowing that their best days were still to come. From the flames of one winter's night to a second chance that seemed impossible, Daniel Hayes never imagined that saving a stranger would place him at the center of love, scandal, and redemption. And yet, as Rebecca's star begins to rise, one revelation threatens to shatter everything they've built together. Was it fate that brought them back into each other's lives, or a cruel twist designed to break them apart once again? Because sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in fire, but in the heart. And Daniel's story has only just begun. End of Nighter. Click the next video to uncover what happens next. Subscribe if you believe in second chances, and tell us in the comments, can love truly overcome the past? Thank you so much for watching and for sharing this story with me. I don't take it lightly that you spent these moments here. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? And what part of this story touched you the most? I'd love to read your reflections. And if you believe in stories of hope, redemption, and the power of love to heal, please subscribe and join this community. Until next time, remember this: you are seen, you are valued, and no matter your past, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow.